Okay, so here's the plan, Rathian. They're distracted, just shoot a fireball while they're distracted. Oh, okay, just shoot it now. Just shoot it now. You fucking missed! You know what, just ram it. Just ram it. You bitch!
Welcome, hunters, to the hunt, and today's target shall be the pink Rathian. The reason why I am squirmish and squealing and squirting? Nah. The reason why I'm just a little bit, perhaps, a little bit salty is that pink Rathian is nothing more interesting than regular Rathian. Or about as annoying as regular Rathian, or in fact, what does pink Rathian do differently than normal Rathian? I am genuinely curious as to know what this subspecies does differently than its original counterpart, because pink Rathian, to me, I have just an incredible amount of difficulty trying to figure out what it does more differently. And it's not like I can say that for every other subspecies in the entire game, or variant species, or really fucking anything. Like, if we take a look at even rare species, to be honest, so like yourself, a Rathalos or Gil Rathian, which are far more distinctive than in regular counterpart. Well, granted, they are in Master Rank, and they're supposed to do a lot more. Pink Rathian, to me, even in his behavior, seems so incredibly like its predecessor that it's undeniable for me to say that I cannot find a single thing that it does differently outside of being maybe a little bit more beefy and perhaps having a little more like damage potential. Like, I am honest to God confused as to what I'm supposed to think about this monster. And since I don't really like normal Rathian, then guess what? I'm not that much of a fan of pink Rathian either. So bear me to say that this entire episode will be fairly straight towards a negative to say. It still has a lot of the unfortunate abilities where pink Rathian does a lot of running back and forth. There's a lot of like tail whipping and stuff that I generally don't like. Maybe that's a new move, but it feels like normal Rathian do that. So like, if I were to give you an example, for let's take its big brother, the Rathalos. Yep. The Rathalos as a subspecies that is the Azure Rathalos, and we will see very soon, in like a couple of days. You'll see the upload. And Azure Rathalos has a behavioral changes that can be easily noticed by a lot of normal players, which is the Azure Rathalos stays and prefers air combat far more than its normal counterpart, which does have about a 50-50 in normal to air combat ratio. I'd say perhaps more leaning towards one way depending on RNG, but generally that's how normal Rathalos works, and Azure just has maybe like an 80 to 20% air combat ratio to ground combat ratio. If I were to just give a general sense of how the behavioral status works. And you could say the same thing about Acidic Glavenus, you can say the same thing about Ebony Odogaron, you could say the same thing about Nightshade Paolumu, you can say every other subspecies and variants in the game. You can absolutely define something new about him, whether it's move or just behavioral status. And you can't do that with pink Rathian, and it's just boggling my mind. And again, it's not that I think that normal Rathian's an interesting fight to begin with, because it's not. But wouldn't it be so much more interesting if it were something that's a little bit more defined, right? Wouldn't it just be like a little bit more, perhaps, even if theoretically the pink Rathian fight would be worse, which, how would you make pink Rathian worse? Don't answer this. It's called Gold Rathian. But even if you were to theoretically make this fight like worse, it would still like have a much more distinct feeling, and to that I'm kind of disappointed in pink Rathian to begin with. The fact that it's not as distinctive, even as other forms like Gold Rathian to me is just flat out better, just because it at least has a lot more of a distinction. And if I were just to fight a regular Oath Rathian, I would just fight Rathian. And I genuinely want somebody in the comments if they can find something in the differences of behavioral status. Again, this is just a retread of the Rathian episode, and I'm sorry if I'm just struggling to come up with any kind of commentary for this beast in particular, because I have nothing new to say about these. I feel like I've run around with this for a couple of minutes now where I just say the same thing, and it's because this thing won't stop fucking running back and forth and shooting fireballs. Also, if you want to know how annoying this series is to film sometime, it's mostly because of shit like this. I've cut out most of these, but I truly wanted to show you too how fighting, especially doing the Naked Monster Hunter challenge, you get into a lot of scenarios where you have to be a lot more defensive. Granted, this doesn't happen the more we go on into later fights or DLC fights, which thank God. But you just gotta stay on your toes on this one and be sure that you take it as slow as humanly possible. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bad time, especially if you were to fight two monsters at the same time, which I do not recommend. In fact, if you're doing the Naked Monster Hunter challenge, please, for the love of Christ, bring a dunk pod, or just dunk pods. It will save you a lot of hassle, and I do mean a lot of hassle. The more we go on, especially in high rank and master rank, the more dunk pods are extremely important. Devil Joes, Basil Goose, Anjanath, Bambaro, these, Fulgur Anjanath I should say, these will absolutely destroy some of your runs if you don't take it very carefully. Especially Devil Joe. Oh my god, Devil Joe and Rajang will kill you to heaven and back just because of how they're not only disruptive but extremely aggressive monsters that do not care about anything you do in their vicinity. It's like, don't even try to touch these monsters. They're so... Anyway, the thing is, just be careful around these. You want to take them slowly. You want to play as defensive as possible while doing this. Otherwise, you're going to have a hell of a time. As you saw, I just wasted 2 minutes of my quest just trying not to get hit by the bloody normal Rathian. And that's another thing too. It's a really interesting little mechanic where when the Rathalos or any kind of Rathalos or any kind of Rathian are in the same room, unlike other monsters, they won't be aggro to each other. And that's a really cool piece of ecology because, as most people know, Rathian is the female equivalent of the Rathalos, and they're essentially just the power. Essentially, Rathalos and the Rathian are a couple, or they're of the same wyvern species, right? So I don't know why to define as something different. It's not like we call human females something different than human. But you know what? It doesn't matter from here. Anyway, so Rathian and Rathalos are a power couple, and they won't attack each other when in the same room. They will never be able to deal damage to each other, and will never enter tough war, and will in fact, if in the rarest of occasion where it happens, if another monster is also in the same vicinity as them, they will be aggroed towards the same monster in order to defend their territory. And there's also another really cool thing that I've never mentioned about Rathian that I might as well talk about now, which is that if you go onto their nest and you want a fast way to aggro them to your position without chasing them around, you can straight up go to either the Rathian nest or the Rathalos nest and try and steal one egg. And the Rathian and Rathalos will immediately beeline towards your location. It's one of the easiest way to aggro one of the monsters towards you, and also makes your hunting time a hell of a lot less of a hassle. Oh my god. Fuck you, Pink Rathian. Anyway, thank you all for coming along, and we'll see you all on another hunt.